Hey guys, Dark Skeleton here, and today I'm going to be continuing my tutorial series on how to create level 1 basic decks for each of the 9 available Hearthstone classes. Now, these decks use only the cards that are available to you immediately upon unlocking the class and finishing the tutorial, so every single Warlock will have each of these class cards. And today's deck is going to be kind of themed around what's called a Zoo Warlock deck, which is about as simple as you can get in terms of Hearthstone decks, and it has a very simple, easy to play kind of workflow. So, how it works is you play a bunch of very weak minions that cost low amounts of mana, leading up to some kind of mid-rangey minions, but the idea is to play your entire hand almost as quickly as you possibly can, so that later on, you'll still have a good board presence, you'll have overwhelmed your opponent's minions by making trades with their minions, with your minions, but then the Warlock's hero power comes into effect, where you can pay 2 life and 2 mana in order to draw an extra card, and you can do this once every turn. So, this means you get 2 cards a turn, your opponent only gets 1, and you just continue to overwhelm them, destroying all of their minions no matter what they throw at you. Even if they clear your entire board, you're still going to get 2 minions a turn. And then they just run out of steam. You don't. You're a Warlock. You keep going. Then you finish them off with what you have on the field. It's very simple. Just trade your minions into their minions. Anyway, so I'll go ahead and explain each of the cards I chose for this deck and why they're in there. Starting off, we have Elven Archer. I've been using this in a lot of the other tutorial decks because it has a very good battlecry effect. As a 1 mana minion, it only has 1 attack and 1 health. Though, when you play it, it is able to deal 1 damage directly to anything without taking damage itself. So you can use Elven Archer on an opponent's minion who's either something like a 2-1, like a Voodoo Doctor, which is actually in this deck, or a weakened enemy minion that only has 1 HP remaining. If you're able to destroy a minion with Elven Archer, then it's done its job. It was a good play. So hold on to those, use them to finish off weak opponent minions. And ideally you don't want to have to play it on turn 1 unless it's you going second, because then you can destroy their 1-drop. Next up we have Voidwalker, which is a okay card. It's seen in very many Zoo decks. Maybe it's actually starting to fall out of the meta a little bit because there's so many other options. But what makes a Voidwalker decent is that it is a taunt minion that has 3 HP but only costs 1 mana, sorry. The neutral version of this card, a Goldshire Footman, only has 2 health, and that card is considered absolutely terrible. But the extra health can make Voidwalker pretty decent. Its weakness is if you play a Voidwalker on turn 1, and then the opponent, he follows up with something like an Acidic Swamp which has 3 attack and 2 health, then they'll battle, and your Voidwalker will lose. Acidic Swamp will remain with 1 HP, and that's very common for 2-drops. A lot of 2-drops have 3 attack and 2 health, so you do have to watch out for that. That said, it's good at protecting your other minions, or your face if you need it to, so it's not too bad considering it only costs 1 mana. Next up we have Voodoo Doctor. It's a card that is normally considered pretty terrible. However, I rate it slightly higher for Warlock decks simply because it restores health to your hero or to one of your friendly minions. Either target is good in this deck because you want your minions to stay on the field to overwhelm your opponent, and you want the extra health on your hero so that you can use that to life tap. It's just a pretty decent battlecry effect. What makes it so weak is it only has 1 HP, so it's very easy to be taken out by something like an Elven Archer. But overall, it's not too bad. It gives you something to play. Ideally, you don't want to play this on turn 1 either because you're going to have full health and there's going to be nothing to heal up. But aside from that, it's okay. Next up, we have Acidic Swamp, which is a very good card. You will even see this in some of the higher end decks. It can be replaced by something called Harrison Jones, though that's a legendary and very few people have that. But Acidic Swamp, what makes this so good is it allows you to destroy your opponent's weapon. So if you're going up against a class like Hunter, Shaman, Rogue, or Warrior, those are the 4 classes that have weapons right now, you can use the Murloc Tidehunter, destroy your opponent's weapon after they play it, and then after that you still have a 3-2 minion, which is the standard stat lineup for a 2-drop. So if you can hold on to this for a while and hopefully destroy one of your opponent's weapons for free, that would be ideal, and that can really swing the tide of a game. Speaking of tides, we have Murloc Tidehunter in this deck, which is also considered a pretty bad card on average. Though the thing is, there are very few good 2-drops from the basic set. The best, by far and away, is Acidic Swamp. But Murloc Tidehunter, I feel, somewhat belongs in this deck, because it's about board control, and you can use the 2 minions to trade into your opponent's minions. And in combination with this, we also have Raid Leader, which boosts all of your other minions' attack by +1. So if you have a minion that creates another minion, then that doubles the effectiveness of Raid Leader. And since you're playing so many minions in this deck, you're going to have stuff on the field which Raid Leader can buff ideally. And then you use those minions to make even better trades against your opponent's minions and re-establish your board dominance. The card you will want to replace Raid Leader with as soon as you get it is Direwolf Alpha. It costs 2 mana, but only buffs adjacent minions by +1/+1. That said, it's almost always better because you very rarely have 3 or more other minions besides Raid Leader on the board at once. And even if you do, it's going to be so weak to AoE that that's dangerous. AoE being area of effect, of course, if you didn't know that. Anyway, the other 2-drop I put in this deck, and I was kind of cringing over this because Succubus is not that great of a card. At first glance, you see it costs 2 mana, it gets you 4 attack and 3 health. You would think that's very good. The problem is, many 2-drop minions, aside from Succubus, have 3 attack. So if you play a Succubus, and then they play any 2-drop that happens to have 3 attack, and they end up battling, then your Succubus is going to die, even though it has better stats technically, just because the 3 attack trades right into that 3 health. And Succubus is a pretty bad card because it has the Battlecry effect to discard a random card. The reason I would put this in this deck is, in case of emergencies, you absolutely have to reestablish the board dominance, like your opponent's beating you down, and you have too many cards in your hand so you don't mind losing one. In that case, Succubus is okay. Sometimes it can get a pretty decent trade, and 4 attack is a lot if you're able to use it efficiently. So next up we have the 3 cost cards, including Drain Life, which I also consider to be a pretty bad card in general. It deals 2 damage and restores 2 health to your hero, and what makes this a problem is that it costs 3 mana in order to do so. It won't be able to destroy many powerful minions. It might at best be able to kill something like a 5 attack minion that has dropped to 2 health because it tried to kill one of your minions, and then you can finish it off with a Drain Life. But this card is so slow that if you play this when you don't have a dominating board, then sure, you'll kill their minion, but then you won't have the mana to spend on creating more of your own minions, which means your opponent is just going to put more of their own stuff down on the board the next turn and continue to overwhelm you, making this card okay. I mean, it's direct damage, and you can even use it on your opponent if you have to finish him off. The ideal case is you kill something that has 2 health remaining, and if you get that ideal scenario, then it's okay. But it's one of the first cards you're going to want to remove from the deck. Next up we have Shadow Bolt, which is much better than Drain Life, and that it deals 4 damage directly to a minion for the same cost. Healing 2 HP is okay, but when you're paying 3 mana in order to do so, and you don't have the board presence already, then that's dangerous. But Shadow Bolt can really take out some big threats by dealing 4 damage instead of 2, so it's much better. And you rarely want to be going for the face as a Zoo Warlock anyway, so the fact that it can't damage your opponent's hero is not a big deal. You want to be using the spells on hard-to-kill minions in the first place. Raid Leader, we already went through that one. Synergizes well when you have a lot of minions on the field. Razorfin Hunter. This is another card that kind of synergizes with Raid Leader, and it does that by doing the same Battlecry summon a 1/1 token onto the board. Razorfin Hunter I consider to be better than a Murloc Tidehunter, because its total stats come out to 3 and 4 respectively for 1 more mana, as opposed to 3 attack and 2 health, but it is much more durable. The Razorfin Hunter himself, or herself rather, has 3 HP, which is much harder to remove than a 1 HP guy. So playing this onto a board with a lot of minions is slightly less dangerous. If you go up against something like a Holy Nova from a Priest, it'll deal 2 damage to all your minions, but at least Razorfin Hunter will survive. Overall though, its total combined stats are very good. 3 attack and 4 health for 3 mana is not bad. Next up we have Shattered Sun Cleric, another card which kind of synergizes well with those weak minions or the battle cry minions that summon other minions, and that you can use Shattered Sun Cleric to immediately give any of your friendly minions on the board a +1/+1 buff. So you can churn a 1/1 Boar and do a 2/2 Boar, or a 1/1 Murloc and do a 2/2 Murloc, 2/1 and do a 3/2, so on and so forth. And what this allows you to do is make better trades, and since this deck is all about making good trades, you play Shattered Sun Cleric. Your guy who normally couldn't kill another guy or couldn't kill it without surviving, now can kill it, and possibly with surviving, and that alone makes Shattered Sun Cleric very good. If you play it on a board that doesn't have anything, though, it's kind of weak because it only has 3 attack and 2 stats for 3 mana. Next up we have this deck's oh shit card, Hellfire. It deals 3 damage to all characters. That includes your opponent's hero, your hero, everything on the board, and it's something you want to use when you're falling behind. If your opponent has like 4 minions on the field because they've just been trading much better than you, or they just recently board cleared, that is to say, basically AoE'd your field, destroyed all your minions at once, and they're just going to keep pounding down on you, and there's no real easy way to reestablish the board, then that's when you Hellfire. You just clear the board, kill all their stuff, and then you can follow that up by starting to replay some of your own minions and regain your board dominance. There's only one of them in here because it's a very situational card, and it's something you don't typically want to use twice, because dealing 3 damage to your own hero as a Warlock is a big deal, because every point of damage you take means less life tapping, which means less steam to pull you into the later game. Next up we have some very good cards that you might actually see in some higher end decks, including Stormwind Yeti, which is the definition actually of a value card. It has 4 attack, 5 health. Any minion that has slightly less attack than it has health is going to be good at trading into your opponent's minions. And it is just a very solid card because the total combined attack and health for the mana cost of 4 is very efficient. It's powerful, it's hard to deal with. It's typically going to get 2 minions for 1 card, which makes it very good in itself. Next we have Sinjin Shieldmaster. Similar to the Stormwind Yeti, in that it has 5 health, but it has 1 less attack for the same mana cost. What makes this good is that it has Taunt. Taunt allows you to use Sinjin to basically force your opponents to attack into this. They can't go for your face, they can't go for your weaker minions, and Sinjin typically will kind of screw your opponent's flow up. They'll have to make trades that they otherwise wouldn't have, and that makes Sinjin Shieldmaster good, even in some of the higher end decks. Both of those cards, however, do pretty well synergized with the Darkscale Healer, which you can play on the following turn. It restores 2 health to all friendly characters, so any of those beefier minions that by default have 3, 4, or 5 HP, have already killed one of your opponent's minions but are still on the board, are going to benefit a lot from this. Restoring 2 health to them brings them back up to a healthier state, harder to remove, or possibly up to full health, and that makes it very nice. But it also has the added benefit of healing your hero up 2 HP, which means you can throw out another life tap or possibly survive 1 more turn in the game. So I consider Darkscale Healer pretty good. It also works well with Warlocks specifically, just because Warlocks are so board control focused and their HP is just so valuable to them. So the extra mana cost it costs over a Stormwind Yeti for the same stats, the battle cry can be very, very nice. Next up we have a singular Frostwolf Warlord. This card is slightly situational in that its battle cry, gaining +1/+1 for every friendly minion on the battlefield, requires you to have a board state, obviously. Without having other minions on the board, this card's very weak. It only has 4 attack and 4 health. Though, if you manage to have 3 minions on the board, you play this, it becomes a 7/7, and that would be fantastic stats. 14 stats for 5 mana. It's just slightly situational because it has that requirement there. Next up, we have a Boulderfist Ochre. This card is mostly put in here for curve, but it's also very solid in general. As I mentioned earlier when talking about the Stormwind Yeti, cards that have slightly less attack than they do HP are good at trading. So this thing has 7 HP, which is quite a ton, and 6 attack, which means it's going to be able to pound just about anything your opponent can throw at you. If they have a Sinjin Shieldmaster, this Boulderfist Ochre is going to go straight through it and still remain on the board as a huge threat. So if you get up to turn 6 and you have this on turn 6, it's a great play. And lastly, we have a Stormwind Champion. Only one of them, not because it's a bad card, but because Zoo typically wants to run lower cost minions. You don't want to have too many cards in your hand that never get to be played. So its 7 mana cost makes it a little bit off-putting. But if you've been trading well throughout the game, and you've gotten up to your turn 7, where you have a board with several minions on the field, then you can play the Stormwind Champion to be kind of a finishing blow. And it does that by buffing your other minions by +1/+1, which will mean that your weak minions are going to have more stats and be able to trade better with your opponent, or possibly even to finish your opponent off right then and there. Since 2 or 3 minions means 2 or 3 extra damage, that turn and every other turn after it. So if you play a Stormwind, it's a huge threat for your opponent to deal with. You may want to try and protect it with something like Ascension Shieldmaster, which, by the way, is going to be a 4/6, even better, as long as your Stormwind Champion is on the field, but it's definitely going to be the target they're trying to remove. So yeah, just to kind of go over things again, as Zoo, you want to play a lot of minions from your hand, overwhelm your opponent, never let them gain the upper hand on the board than you do. Never let them get the upper hand on the board. Just have more minions than them, kill all their stuff off. Be most wary of AoE effects like a opponent's Warlock's Hellfire, a Holy Nova from a Priest, or a Flame Strike from a Mage, simply because it's going to destroy all of your stuff, so you have to be very mindful of AoEs. Aside from that, cards you're going to want to look at in terms of replacing cards in this deck, once you get them, are going to be Soulfires, which you can get from leveling up. You can throw some of these Succubi or Drain Lives out of the deck. In favor of that, it is a 0 mana card that deals 4 damage, discarding a card from your hand, but the fact it can deal damage directly to your opponent's face as a finisher, or immediately to destroy any minion on the field, it will just really turn games around, and you can turn a losing situation into a winning one in a singular turn by having Soulfire. Great card, you want it in every Warlock deck once you get it. As I mentioned earlier, Direwolf Alpha. It is the same as a Raid Leader, except it costs 1 less mana and only buffs adjacent minions by just +1 attack. But it's very good. Generally going to have 2 or 3 minions on the board, and Direwolf Alpha, in most cases, is going to be better than a Raid Leader, just because it costs less mana, and Raid Leader is very rarely going to get more than +2 extra damage for your minions. Because having 4 minions on the board doesn't happen too often, and you don't really want it to happen too often anyway, because it is weak to AoE effects. Aside from that, stuff like Doomguards, if you manage to pick that up as a rare, it is a 5/7 with charge, meaning it can attack immediately. Discards 2 cards in your hand, which is one of the reasons you want to get rid of your hand so quickly, so that you have less drawback from the Soulfire and Doomguard discard effects when you have those cards. Obviously, less important in this deck when you don't have them. But that's a very staple Zoo card, and it's a rare, so once you get that, you want to put that in the deck. Probably replacing some of the higher end cards like Darkskill Healer or Stormwind Champion. And another a good card you can keep the lookout for is a Defender of Argus, giving your adjacent minions +1/+1, and also equipping them with Taunt. If you have 2 minions on the board, you throw a Defender of Argus, it will become a very efficient card. Its base stats, by the way, 2 attack, 3 health for 4 mana, but it's all about the battle cry for that card. Anyway, this deck should be able to get you through some of your first early games, though there are a lot of very good Zoo cards that you can keep an eye out for as you level up. Just focus on controlling the board and getting a general sense of how the game works, because it is a very board control oriented game, and this deck should be able to kind of instruct you a little bit in how that kind of flow works out for you. Anyway, I've been Dark Skeleton. If you have any extra questions, you can leave them down below in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you, or send me a direct message if you want. And if you want to see my other tutorials as they come out, I believe I have 4 of these right now for the other decks, but I'm going to finish the rest in the next few days. Then feel free to subscribe, and yeah, I'll have them up for you. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found this useful.